Julie Hecht is a pleasure to introduce her. She's a canine expert. There's nothing more needed at a cat symposium than a dog person. And so we have a canine expert, a science writer, and also an adjunct professor in the anthrozoological program here at Canisius College. She manages the Howowitz Dog Cognition Lab at Barnard College down in New York City. And she often lectures to the public and student groups on research into dog cognition. She's published in the Bark and blogs very excellently in Dog Spies and Do You Believe in the Dog? Julie Hecht.
Well, I am so happy to be here today talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, namely dogs and cats in the home. And one of the reasons that I am so attracted to this topic is that it is true. I am a part of a dog cognition lab where we're trying to understand and unveil the perspective of companion dogs living in the home. And secondly, I have a background in applied animal behavior. So the study of animals that find themselves in human environments that are either managed or controlled by humans. And of course, I have my own cat at home, and I consider his happiness and welfare and try and make him happy on a daily basis. So these topics are very near and dear to me. So we all know that dogs have a global presence, that they're throughout the globe. We've seen that. But the question that we're looking at here today is considering dogs and cats that are found within the home. So a recent survey found that there's approximately 69.9 million dogs that are owned in the United States alone. There are 74.1 million owned cats in the United States. And at the same time, what's interesting is this overlap between dogs and cats in the home is not often discussed, nor is there much research into the experience and the behavioral exchange between dogs and cats in the home. At the same time, we do know that of pet-owning households, 15.3% live with both a cat and a dog. So this is an area of consideration and should receive more attention. And I do know that we're at a Cats in Context conference, but I just want to know how many people just live with a cat? Raise your hand. Just a cat. Okay. And how many people just live with a dog? Raise your hand. And how many people live with both a cat and a dog? Awesome. So there's some overlap, and this is the group that we'll be talking about today. So today I'm going to be giving you some insights into dogs and cats in the home. And what we're interested in, first off, is, well, what is the nature of this relationship? How would we characterize the nature of these three or these many legs in the home that are a joined unit? What are some of the factors that contribute to the quality of the relationship between these three individuals? And finally, because hopefully I'm not talking about a household that's filled with just dogs and cats, we're really also interested in the people. So the people and their relationship with both of these individuals. And what I'm hoping today is that I'm able to bring something a little bit different to the table that you might not have initially considered. So the word on the street is that this is the stereotype of dogs and cats, that they are fighting like cats and dogs, and we know that cartoons and comics are notorious for capitalizing on these perceived differences between the two species. So here's a cartoon where an anthropomorphized dog is saying to the cat, they don't keep you on a leash because they want you to run away. So there's this idea that there's a constant difference of opinion, there's a constant disconnect between dogs and cats. And what's interesting to point out and what we should acknowledge is that there are differences between dogs and cats. As a general rule, dogs have a long history of living in highly social groups. Their behavioral repertoire is reflective of this need to interact with many different social individuals, social environments. So we have dogs going off to war. We have them herding sheep. We have them visiting people in the hospital. They're going into classrooms. Additionally, just think about it. We have them going on daily walks on leashes, interacting with many different individuals, both dogs and people. So the behavioral repertoire of dogs is much accommodating to all of these various instances in which they might find themselves. Cats, on the other hand, have undergone much less of this selective pressure to engage in all these different social environments, but at the same time, as a companion animal in our home, they might be exposed to a number of these environments. So there are certainly differences between dogs and cats just from an evolutionary perspective. And a side note to the differences, what I want to point out is that although there are these differences between dogs and cats, there are, through our selective breeding, I just wanted to point out that there are potential impairments that we are giving to both dogs and cats. So through artificial selection, we are stunting their ability to communicate. So we are creating inflexible facial features, we are creating the shortening or non-existence of tails. So in a sense, although there are these differences, what I'm seeing as a similarity is we're imposing these challenges to their communication repertoires for both dogs and cats. And I really like this example because there's two pictures of a cat with their back arched. Obviously, there's differences in the mouth position, differences with the ears, differences with the eyes. There's differences, but you'll notice that that tail is also a huge part of their communicative repertoire. The same goes for dogs. So I just want to point out that while there are differences, this is also a shared problem that they both face. So getting back to the differences, it doesn't necessarily imply that there would or should be a problem when dogs and cats are in the home. And this is where research can come in and try and tell us, well, what are the nature of the relationships of existing pairs, of existing dyads, of dogs and cats? How do dogs and cats feel about one another? So a study set out to do just that. They observed the pairs of familiar dogs and cats in the home, and they saw what they were doing. And what they noted was that there was a high degree of amicability. So these cats and dogs were playing, they maintained proximity with one another. Overall, there was a good relationship. And more specifically, there were certain behaviors that were supporting this relationship. So they found a high rate, 75% of the pairs showed nose-to-nose contact. This is a common affiliative display among cats. And here I'm pointing out that dogs and cats are performing this display. So dogs are joining this behavioral display with cats in nose-to-nose contact. And here's what it would look like with cats. They also explored something that they called mutual understanding of body language with possible opposite behaviors. So what they were suggesting is that a behavior performed by one species might have a different meaning for that other species, and they were interested in, well, how are they responding to these opposite behaviors? For example, lying on the back for a dog could be a distance decreasing, a more of a cohesive display, depending on the context, whereas for a cat, it could have something more to do with distance increasing or aggression. So how are these animals responding to these different behaviors? And what they found was that dogs and cats were, for the most part, acting in accordance with these opposite displays. So 75% of opposite behavior displayed by cats was read appropriately by the dog, and 80% of the opposite behavior displayed by the dog was read correctly by the cat. So what I want to point out from this, and this is going to be a constant theme, is that both dogs and cats are constantly learning about their social environments. They're learning about the members of their social environments. They are monitoring, observing, and synthesizing information during their individual lifetimes. So that, I think, is a very interesting point, just to point out the importance of learning. And by taking note of their attention to these opposite behaviors, it's a reminder for us to notice and, in a sense, honor that they are learning. So the other thing I wanted to point out was a suggested factor that could contribute to the quality of these relationships between dogs and cats. And what they were looking at when they compared the questionnaire results with what they found in the behavioral observation, they suggested that the initial age of encounter of the other species was incredibly important. So they were noting that early introductions were very important for the development of amicable behavior. They found that if the dog was younger than 1 year at age of encountering a cat, mutual amicability was high and aggression and indifference were low. The same was true for the cat, but they in this sample suggested that the cat might have a shorter window. They were saying 6 months. At the same time, it's possible this should be taken with a grain of salt, just in the sense that early life exposure to the other species associated with happy, positive interactions are setting the stage for these later amicable relationships. Also, a greater frequency of nose-to-nose behaviors, all of these things that these dyads were for the most part showing. So while we do know that not all dogs and cats living in the home are going to look like this pair on the screen, what I'm trying to point out is that this is highly possible, that there can be these amicable behaviors, there can be play, there can be nose-to-nose contact, and that certain factors like early life introduction to the other species can greatly help in that. So in this last section, I'm going to try and throw humans into the mix briefly in an attempt to take a closer look at our relationship with cats and dogs. First off, how we communicate with them, and second of all, I want to give you a tangible reminder of why our relationships with dogs and cats rock, so are really good. So the first deals with research into how dogs and cats attend to our visual communicative gestures. So you guys all know that when I point, you know that I'm not trying to communicate something about the tip of my finger. You know that I'm trying to use this pointing gesture to indicate something in the environment, to, in a sense, draw a line between my finger and some external point. So humans we understand that this is what pointing is about, that it's about a communicative gesture. And so what they were interested in is understanding if dogs and cats were good at following this communicative gesture, and in this case, it was to food. And what they found was that both dogs and cats did a really good job at following this communicative gesture. Now, what's interesting, I want to point out for dogs, is that their overarching propensity to both attend to our communicative gestures and just attend to us in general is very often thought to be associated with the process of domestication. And while we might find there are differences in how dogs attend to humans, attend to our communication signals, the thought is that through domestication, dogs are very much primed to attend to us. Cats, on the other hand, have not received this same selective pressure, but they are displaying the behavior. So this again goes back to this idea of cats are learning during their individual lifetimes. And when I think about how much attention is given to the idea that dogs can learn, can be trained, and on the other side, there's these perceptions about cats, I just want to suggest that it might do the cat some benefit to notice what they're attending to, the fact that they're constantly learning, and give them opportunities to develop new associations with possible noxious stimuli, and just engage that they are learning. So that was the thing that I wanted to say about how they're attending to our communicative gestures. And then the last thing I wanted to point to was that it's this idea about laughter. And I wanted to point out that dogs, cats, and humans can promote this idea of laughter. So we all know that laughter is the best medicine. That's a scientific fact. The Mayo Clinic notes that it's no joke that humans derive stress relief from laughter. Laughter is also a very social behavior. It often occurs in the presence of others, and those others are very often friends. So one study set out to explore the occurrence of laughter of people who owned and lived with different animals. They wanted to know people who lived with dogs only, cats only, both cats and dogs, or neither cats and dogs. And these people got to record laughter logs. And they had to say the frequency, how often they laughed. They got to say who was present when they were laughing, and they got to say the source of their laughter. So was it the mass media? Was it something another person did? Was it something the pet did? Was it a joke being told? And my favorite is just making yourself laugh. Why did you laugh? So what they found was that one of the groups that was laughing the most were people that lived with both dogs and cats. So it's just interesting to consider that from our framework, dogs and cats in the home are incredibly enjoyable. We enjoy they're bringing things to us that we cannot derive on our own. So I hope that in this brief talk, you've got a nice taste for the interplay between dogs and cats and humans. I think it's a pretty great relationship, and we have the potential to continue to do a lot with it. So thank you very much.